The afternoon sun spilled across the cafe terrace, warming polished tables and half-empty cups. Laughter bounced easily between friends, mixing with the hiss of the espresso machine and the scrape of chairs against stone. It was the kind of place where people came to forget stress, forget strangers, forget anything uncomfortable. That's when the girl appeared. She stood at the edge of the terrace, almost invisible at first. Thin shoulders, a faded jacket 2 sizes too big. Dust clung to her shoes like it had become part of them. In her hands, she held a violin, old, scratched, but carefully cleaned, as if it mattered more than food or sleep. Her fingers were red from the cold, gripping the case like it might be taken from her at any moment. She took a small step forward. "Can I play for food?" she asked. Her voice barely rose above the noise, but it was enough. A man at the nearest table laughed, sharp and sudden. "Did you hear that?" he said to his friends. "Play for food." Another smirked. Someone muttered, "Go beg somewhere else." Chairs shifted. Eyes flicked toward her, then away, like she was something unpleasant ruining the view. The girl's cheeks burned. She tightened her grip on the violin strap. For a moment, it looked like she might turn around, disappear back into the streets where no one noticed her at all. Her stomach growled softly, reminding her why she had come. The man waved his hand dismissively. "This isn't a street circus," he said. Laughter followed. Light, careless, cruel. The girl lowered her head. Her shadow stretched long across the stone floor, thin and fragile. She swallowed, took a breath, and stepped forward again. They laughed. They didn't know yet. This was the last moment they would ever laugh at her. The girl didn't argue. She didn't beg again. She simply opened the violin case. The soft click of the latches sounded small, almost fragile, but it cut through the noise more sharply than the laughter had. A few people glanced over, curious now, if only for a second. She lifted the violin with care, resting it beneath her chin as if it were something alive, something that trusted her. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from hunger. She raised the bow. The cafe buzzed on, unaware of what was about to change. Then the bow touched the strings. The first note floated into the air, thin but steady. It wasn't loud enough to demand attention, yet it carried something that made people pause. A fork hovered halfway to a mouth. A laugh died in someone's throat. The sound slipped between conversations, wrapping itself around them before anyone realized they were listening. She closed her eyes. The music deepened, one note leaning into the next. It wasn't polished or perfect, but it was real. Every stroke of the bow carried cold nights on concrete sidewalks, empty mornings, and the quiet ache of being unseen. The violin cried, then whispered, then sang. A woman near the window slowly turned in her chair. A barista stopped wiping the counter. Even the man who had laughed first felt his chest tighten, though he didn't understand why. The melody grew warmer, fuller, as if the girl were pouring everything she had left into those strings. Her fingers moved with memory, not practice. This music lived inside her long before the streets ever claimed her. The cafe was no longer a cafe. It was a room holding its breath. And in that breath, something fragile began to break open. Pride, indifference, cruelty, note by note. No one laughed now. They listened. The melody slowed, stretching each note as if it didn't want to let go. The violin's voice grew deeper, fuller, carrying a sadness that felt older than the girl herself. It wasn't just music anymore, it was memory. A woman at the corner table felt her throat tighten. The tune was familiar, a lullaby. Her mother used to hum it late at night, brushing her hair, promising her that everything would be okay. Without realizing it, tears slid down her cheeks. Across the terrace, a man clenched his jaw. His eyes burned. He hadn't cried in years. Not at funerals, not in hospitals, but something about the sound cracked a door inside him he thought was sealed forever. The violin didn't accuse. It didn't beg. It simply told the truth. The girl played on, eyes still closed. Her face was calm, but her fingers trembled with effort. Each note carried a piece of her life. Sleeping under bridges, counting coins that never felt like enough, being looked through instead of looked at. The bow pressed harder now, and the violin answered with a cry so raw it felt almost human. The man who had laughed earlier shifted in his chair. He couldn't meet anyone's eyes. His smile was gone. Shame settled heavy in his chest. He remembered the way he had waved her away, how easy it had been to turn cruelty into a joke. The final notes rose softly, like a farewell. The music thinned, then faded, leaving the air trembling. Silence followed. No clapping, no words, just the sound of quiet sobs, the scrape of a chair, someone sniffing back tears. Even the city beyond the cafe seemed to pause, as if it, too, was listening. The girl lowered her violin. She had said everything she needed to say. The silence lasted a few seconds longer than anyone expected. It wasn't awkward, it was heavy. It was the kind of silence that makes you realize you've been living wrong. Then the first movement began. A plate was set down in front of the girl. It wasn't fancy, just a simple meal: bread, soup, a small salad. But the act itself felt like a miracle. The girl's eyes opened slowly, scanning the table as if she couldn't believe it was real. She looked up at the people around her. Their faces were soft now. Their eyes weren't mocking anymore. They were full of something else: guilt. The man who had laughed first stood up, shaking. His hands were unsteady. He walked toward her like someone approaching a wild animal, unsure if he was safe. He didn't speak at first. He just stared at the violin, the girl, and the empty space where his laughter had been. I'm sorry," he whispered, voice trembling. The words came out raw, like he was tearing them from his own heart. "I shouldn't have laughed." The girl blinked slowly, as if the apology was a new kind of sound she had never heard before. She didn't smile at first. She just nodded, almost imperceptibly. Then she did something no one expected. She reached into her violin case and pulled out a small piece of paper, crumpled, worn. She handed it to him. "Here," she said quietly. "It's a song I wrote. You can keep it." The man's eyes widened. He stared at the paper, then back at her. Tears began to fall freely down his face. The other people around the table watched, their own eyes shining now. Someone else stepped forward and wrapped a warm coat around the girl's shoulders. Another person placed a cup of hot tea beside her plate. The barista even brought her a blanket from the storage room, saying nothing, just moving as if it was the most natural thing in the world. The girl took a bite of the food. She ate slowly, like she was afraid it might disappear. Then she looked up and smiled. Not a proud smile, a grateful one, the kind that says, "I'm still here." The man who mocked her earlier sat back down, shaking. He stared at his hands as if he couldn't believe he'd ever treated someone like that. The whole terrace felt different now, lighter, softer, like a heavy cloud had finally lifted. The girl picked up her violin again, but she didn't play. Instead, she stood, bowed her head, and whispered, "Thank you." And for the first time, the cafe didn't laugh. They listened. They cried. They changed.